Hej allesammans och välkomna. Klockan är 10 och vi är live med Aktieportföljen. Första, vi kommer ha 7 stycken spännande bolag idag. Det är lite familjära namn kring Aktieportföljen, bland annat SAS Energy och DVU Technologies. Men även lite nya namn där vi bland annat hittar Kind of Brave Entertainment och även Q-Life. Men först ut så är det ett nytt namn i alla fall, och det är Gabather. Och där har vi VD Michael Robin Witt med oss. Hjärtligt välkommen.
Tackar.
Du ska få presentera och du kommer göra presentationen i engelska så mycket jag förstår.
Ja.
Yes. Och sen kommer jag återkomma och ställa ett par frågor.
På svenska.
På svenska.
Okay, no worries. Jag börjar. All right, thanks for having me first of all. Actually, I've been here before, so I'm one of the routine guys. So next 20 minutes I will give just a snapshot on Gabather, where we stand today. And Gabather comes from the GABA therapeutics. GABA is a neurotransmitter we work with, and we work with developing next generation therapies. We work in the area of mental health and target mental disorders. So the Gabather team is myself, it's also Christine Ryan and Stefan Rienmark. We are the three in the management with a very lean management team. Disclaimer is that we are right now in a financial transaction period, and it's on December 20th. I'll come back to that, but as part of the presentation. Very short on Gabather. This is as short and bullet point and bulletproof you can make it. Keywords here in the Gabather itself, that this comes actually from research of the University of Lund and University of Copenhagen, for many years of research within the GABA A receptor system in the brain. We have a very experienced board, very experienced management team. I'm going to introduce them a little bit more later. Area we work in is mental health and new therapies within mental health. Important also for me is to point out that we are bench to bedside. It's a bit of a catchword, but we literally synthesize our molecules ourselves, and we drive the development all the way to the bedside, which means the patient. So we are not an in-licensing / out-licensing company. The market that we address is enormously big. It's a bit of a numbers game. I only read recently that the biggest industries in the world after oil and weapons is actually the pharma industry. Our drug candidate GT002, we've been developing for the last couple of years now, has gone quite far, and a lot about it more later. We are at an interface between a phase 1b, phase 2 trials right now. We finalized our last and third and last clinical trial now in Q4. And I think we have a very solid patent and IP series, very important. And we do have a pipeline compounds going back to that. We are bench to bedside company, so we have compounds that also patented that we can develop further. And the rights issue, a little bit more about that. Just key to mention it, we are listed in Nasdaq Stockholm since April 2018 at the First North Growth Market. And the area we work in, as I mentioned, is mental health, and I cannot underline, and I no reason to throw the big numbers around, is one of the very, very large health issues in current times. I think it's not an underestimation that 1 in 4 people will experience mental health problems, larger or bigger. Unfortunately, not all of them will be very serious. Mental health problem starts at a very young age, so we have an age group that starts very young and goes to a very old age. If you look at mental health in the elderly, the societal impact cannot be understood how big this is. It's a huge problem, and I think everybody that listens to this presentation knows at least of somebody who has some issue or had some issue with mental health, be it anxiety disorders, depression in this winter time, for example. The socioeconomic impact is enormous. Of course, people that are literally unable to go to work and participate in society are marginalized because of mental health issues. So the summary is we have a large unmet medical need that we are addressing, and we're trying to develop new therapies for that. That is our arena, so to speak. And the problems that we have, and the problems we are trying to solve to address is there are many therapies available. Many of them are rather old. The molecules that you're treated with come from research from many years ago. There's, of course, always new development, always very interesting events happening. Many of them are inaccurate, though. They have side effects, and it is difficult to anticipate how a patient reacts to a drug in the first place. There are some diseases and indications where there are no treatments, quite simple as that. And of course, precision is the name of the game. So there's a lot of room for improvement where we can actually go in and make a difference as a small biotech company. The solution that we are offering is we have developed through research on many, many years in academia, where I was involved and also in Denmark and Sweden. We've developed highly selective compounds that target a particular receptor neurotransmitter system in the human brain. We've developed a pipeline of those molecules as drug candidates. We've driven one of the candidates through 3 phase 1 studies, i.e. studies in healthy volunteers, where we want to know if it's safe and tolerable, and it is. And the drug that we are driving towards the patient trials is GT002. It's a very, very potent drug, which is good because you need low amounts. And it's very selective, which is also very good because that probably leads to very few side effects, and we haven't seen any. So how are we going to do this? Well, nobody is an island. That includes myself. It's myself, Christine Ryan and Stefan Rehnmark. We've worked together for many years now. We're all very experienced. We have all large careers behind us in the case of myself, biotech, big pharma, small pharma, medium-sized pharma, and half of my career in academia, actually. So if you take all these 3 together, all 3 of us, I think we will get almost to 100 man-years in neuroscience research, and particularly in drug development. So certainly it's a team that can make things happen. And to back us up and support us, we have a board of directors, 5 people, including 2 new members that we recruited this summer, in particular looking at licensing agreement, and includes also Berdiono, which was one of the founders of Gabather many years ago. It's very loyal, very dedicated board member for us. And this presentation is a little bit technical. I will try to simplify it as much as possible within a reasonable margin. The human brain on the left is basically run on 2 systems, one that accelerates the activities and one that decelerates. Glutamate is the accelerator, so to speak, as you can see on the right-hand cartoon. And GABA, from which the name Gabather comes, which stands for gamma-aminobutyric acid, long name, small molecule, is the brake in the system. And it's the balance between the braking and the acceleration that actually gives you the balance in the brain. And this is the GABA receptor system, which is absolutely key, and is the one that we modulate with our molecules. How important is the system? And this is a very busy slide. All I want you to do is look at the very first row, where you have a long row of disorders, diseases, health, mental issues, everything from Alzheimer to schizophrenia. And if you look at the third row, only at the yellow, all of these diseases have symptomology where you have deficiency in cognition. And cognition is a nice word for how we learn and how we understand the world, how we actually navigate ourselves in this world, how we understand what's happening around us. In some diseases, this is very, very seriously inhibited, dysfunctional, like Alzheimer, where literally all your memory functions, all your learning function are very certain. In other diseases, not so serious, but it's a common symptomatology in many, if not all, neuropsychiatric disorders. And our drug, our clinical candidate actually has positive effects on cognition, and that's why we're very open to which indication we're going to, but I'm going to specify this a little bit more. So key message from this busy slide is there are many disorders they have in common is that they have a deficit in the cognitive processing in the human brain, in those mental health issues. So what we have, what I'm trying to present is, of course, lead candidate GT002. The 002 name is because it was one of a list of compounds that we tested. This is now years ago. We ran it through a huge battery of preclinical research. We showed that it has positive effect in learning, memory, actually positive effect in social interaction, which makes it very, very interesting. It's not toxic, and now after 3 successful phase 1 studies, we can definitely say that it's safe and well tolerated in healthy volunteers, which is not a small matter. And I can tell you that the biggest day for Gabather was when we were all sitting in the office and we got the first news that the first trials in man, when it was given for the first time, went successfully and there were no issues. That was a wonderful, great day, and champagne corks were flying. We have an innovative clinical candidate, which is a statement by itself is incredibly good. It's safe. We have not seen any side effects that are of any concern so far. It's well tolerated. We've given it in single and ascending doses, multiple doses. We have it, it's an oral formulation. This is very important. This is a medicine where you don't have to do any tricks to get it into the human body. You literally can take it as a pill. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see this is actually the pill of GT002, our formulation. It's a liquid and capsule. We patented the product process. We've patented the molecule itself. We've patented the synthesis of the molecule, and we've patented the formulation. So we've done a very, very thorough layer after layer, like an onion, patent strategy with our IP advisors. So I think it's a pretty good one. So we are very good there, and including the pharmaceutical development, which was actually one of the bottlenecks in this project. Very difficult to solve. We solved it in-house in research. So what we did, what we decided some time ago when we were going to go and look, what do you look as a biomarker, i.e. an indicator of if you have an effect or not. And you see in this slide, you have a number of diseases. They all have, as I mentioned earlier, deficit in the cognition and learning and memory in all these diseases. And what we decided to use was as a marker was actually neuroimaging, i.e. we want to look at how does the brain, the electrical activity and the energy consumption in the brain, how is that modulated if we give our drug compared to placebo or reference compound. So if we use big words here, we use two methods. One is electroencephalography. We look at the electrical activity in the brain. It's very, very fast. And we also look at MRI, which is an imaging technique, which is a little bit slower, but it gives you more of a regional distribution of the activity in the brain. So our philosophy was we want to look at the neuroimaging approach. We want to look what effect does our candidate have in healthy volunteers, and then we want to translate this into which indications we can use it with the biggest effect. So it is a little bit different. We do not necessarily take blood samples, but we believe that this approach can be very, very sensitive, and we already got some partners around in Europe who are totally convinced of this idea, and I think we will actually be a little bit of pathfinders in this new direction of including this and relying very much on this as a readout on how our candidate affects the brain also in patients later on. How does this look like? This becomes a little bit technical, but I think everybody should see what is that we're actually doing. These are real pictures from actually the MRI tube from the one that we used in the last clinical trial. This is how an EEG study actually looks like. People get a cap, you register the electrical activity from the scalp of the brain, and then you conclude if you have an activity. And I'm going to give you a real lab example of some data analysis, how it looks like with hands-on in a study. So it's what we have done. It's the EEG, fMRI. We combine these two methods at the same time. In our study, we look at the effect of our drug. And we know now that GT002, we are processing the data. We know that GT002 modulates network connectivity, which is very important in brain activity. That is the activity between different areas of the brain. And we believe that this can actually delay the progression of the disease. I think it's a very, very an interesting approach. And also, you know, this is also a journey for all of us. One of the things I've noticed as we go through the data analysis, that AI, which is such a hype and in everybody's back of everybody's head, can become very important in this also because we have a huge amount of data. And of course, if AI is good for one thing, then it's very good to compare a huge amount of data, which is even huger amount of data, if I can put it in a little bit sloppy way. So this will be very interesting. It's ongoing, and I want you to join me in this particular analysis. Here you see a very colorful center picture. This is actually the top of a head, if you look at the circle. And all I want you to look at, if you look at the baseline, which is the first top of the row head, and if you look at 2 hours, IMP stands for medical product, investigation medical product. This is data from our study. And you can see that after 2 hours, you have on the left side, on this particular slide, in this particular example, an activity. Red stands for high activity, blue for low activity, and this activity disappears again after 4 hours. This is the kind of work we are actually doing right now, and this is the kind of data analysis that will show us how does GT002 affect the brain activity, how long does it brain the activity, and in which area of the brain does it affect the activity. Once we know that and we have the whole data set together, we can move ahead and set, looking at this kind of pattern, where can we best use it in what disease area. Summary, first-in-class therapeutic, I think so. This is a very particular way of interacting with the receptor. The GABA A receptor is a very known target, good described target. We completed single and multiple ascending dose studies, SAD and MAD. No side effects, well tolerated. We finalized the EG-fMRI study. We are analyzing it. The data are coming out very, very soon. We're looking for studies in patients for the next year based on the data that we have. We do have a compound pipeline. We have 2 patent families actually, and GT002 has been pushed very much forward because the proof comes with the pudding, and in our case, the proof comes with clinical trials and eventually in patients. Our patents are, I mentioned this earlier, very, very strong in my opinion. We patent compound matter for synthesis, formulation, and medical use eventually. What are our milestones? I already mentioned them before. We've gone through all the clinical trials so far. We've gone for selecting for a new candidate for trials for next year. We've finalized the EG-fMRI study, and we've gone through all the SAD and MAD studies quite successfully. So of course, what we want to do for looking for next year, looking forward, we of course are interested in working on licensing agreement with GT002. We are too small to run this all the way to the market. We're looking for a partner in phase 2 study, in phase 2 trials, either during the trial or after trial. We're very flexible about that. And we of course, with the proceeds of such an agreement, we want to then move ahead our pipeline. We do have compounds that are waiting actually for us in the lab, on the lab bench, to continue working with them. And these are what triggers can you expect from Gabather in 2022? We will start working with planning for patient trials ourselves that we have been developing. All the logistics are in place to be able to start with. We need, of course, the funding for that. Important for us to mention that, of course, we've been working with NIDA, which is the National Institute of Drug Abuse in the States, for over a long time. Studies will be finalizing in Q2 next year. I just want to highlight that one. We have also possibility of looking for so-called orphan drug application, which is specialty. It's very interesting opportunity for us there. We're looking at indications, schizophrenia, dementia, all within the area, as I mentioned previously, of cognitive deficits in these particular diseases, and looking at relief of symptoms, not disease modifying. And we also want to have, of course, a new drug candidate, again, depending on the budget and our success in the clinical trials that we get. And of course, the ultimate goal is to have a licensing agreement in 2024. A quick market snapshot. What's in on the right hand side? You can see what is the value of these kind of projects. They're all in the hundreds of millions US dollars. This is all phase 2 trials, and the poster child of all these agreements or deals is of course the Biogen Sage Therapeutics, and I highlight this in particular because this is a molecule that targets also the GABA A receptor with another chemical structure. I believe that GT002 compared directly has a very good profile as compared to. So just to give you an idea, the potential that is in the volume of this kind of agreements. And we are of course currently talking to potential partners. Just to underline that these kind of studies were actually suggested and recommended by potential partners years ago. Said what we want to do is, what we want to see if GT002 affects activity in the brain. Last but not least, of course, is that among all these data points, it's a learning process for us. We've been approached by people that are interested in looking at the long-term COVID and cognitive defects, and also I think AI and assisted digital image processing becomes very, very interesting for us as we analyze the data from the last trials. Last but not least, I would be a derelict of my duty. There's an investment opportunity in Gabather. We have a transaction period that ends December 20th. We will use it, of course, as mentioned previously, independent for phase studies while we're working on business development and licensing agreement. Focuses on partnerships, of course. We'll continue our drug candidates depending on our budget, and of course we want to keep the operations running and the runway extended. And I think I miraculously made it within 1 minute of my time margin, and I thank you for attention. Thank you for the opportunity, and there's the last 2 links you can click on if you want a little bit more on the transaction itself. And I think that's it.
Tusen tack. Jag tänkte att vi börjar med den här MRI-studien som du pratade lite grann om. Nu är ni har ju fått resultat nu, ni jobbar på analys som jag förstår det från presentationen. Men när den väl är finaliserad, hur förberedda är ni på att påbörja fas 2-studierna direkt?
Det har vi redan gjort. Förberedelse till en fas 2-studie tar väldigt lång tid. Du måste hitta en riktig partner, du måste hitta en protokoll, en synopsis och alla de där ting är på plats. Det är bara vilken patientgrupp du tar, vilken är din partner på sjukhuset och så vidare. Det är på plats. Så beroende på hur analysen går och presentationen av analysen kommer vi gå igång. Det är nummer 1. Nummer 2 är vi ska också använda analysen av FMI-data och EEG-data till diskussioner med partners. Och det är mycket möjligt att partner eller en potentiell partner har sin egen idé, sin egen klinisk program och de vill se hur de data passar in i sitt program. Det är lite skillnad mellan det vad vi kan planera, men kommer alltid att lyssna det vad en potentiell partner är intresserad i.
Och ni är i diskussioner med partners as we speak så att säga. Men vad är det ni letar efter i en partner för er forskningsdel? Är det stöd eller hur?
Vad vi letar i en partner är att vi vill gärna göra att till exempel en partner kör en stor klinisk studie samman med oss. Eller att en partner gör en licensing-avtal med oss. Så vi är väldigt flexibelt och vi har jobbat med många partners inom akademin, inom CROs, men nu är det medium size och large pharma vi pratar mest om. Men hur de vill utforma den kliniska studien, det är upp till dem och vilken indikation är också upp till dem. Men samtidigt måste vi parallellt stå på egna ben, så to speak, och vi måste kunna utveckla vårt eget program. Men det är stort intresse i de data som kommer ut nu eftersom det alltid kommer tillbaka till där jag gick till det första business development-möten många år sedan. Varifrån. Jo, men det var vi vill veta, vad gör GT002 i den mänskliga hjärnan egentligen via FMI? Kom tillbaka när du har de data och så kan vi prata vidare och det har vi just gjort.
Kan ni gå vidare till fas 2 utan en partner eller väntar ni på att...
Nej, det är alltid en fråga om hur stor eller hur liten, hur långt eller hur kort resan ska vara. Men definitivt, vi har gjort en del planer att köra vidare med en fas 2. Vi har alla partners här på plats. Och jag kan bara säga att vi är väldigt aktiva med att titta på soft funding, third party funding hela tiden. Så vi måste... inte vad jag kallar på svenska, think positive, vi ska alltid titta framåt.
Och hur är tonläget när ni diskuterar eventuell kommersialisering då?
Ja, det är väldigt olika. Det blir så lite floskler att det beror på vem du pratar med. Det finns folk som är väldigt intresserade och det är speciellt de som är intresserade i imaging. Det är inte alla som är det. Och det finns också en del partner som är väldigt intresserade i GABA som ett target i din plan. Och det finns någon som inte tror det som target. Så det finns en helt spektrum av det. Så för oss som en liten biotechbolag, det är också att ha lite tur. Vi måste ha riktig tid så det passar i pipeline i en stor bolag. Det ska passa i den indikationen de jobbar med. Så det är därför också att vi alltid planerar, satsar för att köra vår egen kliniska studie. Jag menar i en diskussion, bara för att avsluta det, i en diskussion, ju starkare du står, desto enklare diskussion med en potentiell partner. Men ellers om du är helt beroende av en partnerskap så blir det lite tricky.
En av fokusområdena i emissionen som just nu pågår, det är just affärsutveckling. Tänkte att du skulle kunna få utveckla exakt vad det är som ni vill utveckla.
Vi behöver utveckla partnermöten, presentationer som det här och möten med de stora farmabolag efter vi har presenterat vårt datapaket som vi har nu. Som vi är väldigt stort, både prekliniskt och kliniskt datapaket. Som är ganska bra. Det är inte helt enkelt när man tittar på läkemedelsutvecklingen att nå så långt. Så vi står, jag säger alltid att skeppet är nästan i hamnen. Alltså, det är almost där. Och det är en klinisk fas 2. Men igen, behövs inte bara att nå så långt. Man måste också ha lite tur med vilken tid, vilken profil är det av intresse Big Pharma. Men,
I bilden som visade lite företagsemissionen, det var ju en av flera fokusområden som du presenterade. Jag tänkte fråga dig, av de här 4 områdena som jag såg i presentationen, vad kommer att prioriteras?
Primärt är det allt som har med kognition att göra. Och det kognition per definition är alla områden som är inom storområdet demens. Det är säkert den mest intressanta och den mest straightforward. Och det är den unmet medical need, medicinsk behov är jättestor. Och du tänker på kognitiva defekter, det finns till och med så allmänliga symptomer som stress leder till kognitiva defekter. Så det är definitivt en prioriteringsområde. Kognitiv dysfunktion inom de olika områdena.
Och det är lite mindre än 29 miljoner kronor som ni vill ta in. Täckningskurs på företagsemissionen 1,3 kronor. Har ni täckningsförbindelser eller garanter i den här emissionen?
Nej, vi har inte någon garanter i den här emissionen. Så vi får se hur emissionen går och resultaten av emissionen kommer också styra vad vi kan göra, hur långt vi kan nå. Det är en specifik tillfälle, det är som jag sagt klinisk utveckling av GT002 för att kunna licensieringsavtal och pipeline, det är vår prioritet. Och till det behöver vi den runway.
Vi fick in en fråga från en tittare som också är nyfiken kring den företagsemissionen som ni gjorde i mars. Hur påverkade den er finansiella ställning och om jag får lägga till, varför gör ni just nu en till ny emission?
Vi gör en ny emission för att vi behöver den runway för att köra vidare. Hade vi inte gjort emission i mars, vi inte nått en avslutning av den här studien. Så det har varit förseningar inom studien. Dels var det rent otur, dels är det kliniska studier, blir alltid försenat tyvärr. Så det har tagit längre tid än vi har hoppats på. Men de resultat som jag har sett tills vidare, de är jättebra, så det har varit värt att vänta och faktiskt ha de resultaten inne i huset nu. Och det också, kan också säga att de resultat som den del som vi själv har analyserat och igång med, det har väckt faktiskt ganska stor intresse hos nya partners till nästa år. Inte bara Pharma men också akademin. Så.
Ni har ju tecknat ett samarbetsavtal med franska Minding. Vad kan du berätta om dem?
Jo, det är ett franskt bolag som är experter inom EEG. Och jag tittade runt så mötte jag, hade en del möten med dem och de har exakt samma vision som oss. Och jag är inte expert i EEG, men det är de. Och deras vision är att använda EEG inom läkemedelsutveckling mycket mer än man gör vidare. De tror att det är den absolut bästa metoden och jag håller faktiskt med dem. Så de var väldigt begeistrade för de data jag skickade in. Så det gick faktiskt så att jag skickade en liten datapaket till dem och sa, vad tycker ni? Är det här intressant för er? Och de blev superintresserade i det och det blev en riktigt bra samarbete. Jag är väldigt glad att ibland har man tur och det viktigaste är viktigt att hitta de riktiga partner på riktig tidpunkt.
Har det partnerskapet öppnat upp dörrar för eventuella nya diskussioner?
Menar du med Myndig eller?
Yes.
Jo, absolut. Så de håller på att verkligen gräva sig ner i de där data och det är bara skönt att se. Så jag förväntar mig ett paket från dem väldigt snabbt. Vi har gjort en pressrelease omkring det. Och de vill såklart, baserat på de data, köra vidare sammen med oss i det nya projektet. Till exempel EEG-studien i patienter i nästa år. Vem vill ta som partner till EEG? Myndig kan vara beroende på om det fortsätter att vara så bra som det är nu. som det ser ut nu.
Vi fick ju se er roadmap för 2024, så istället för att ställa frågan vad aktieägare kan förvänta sig under 2024 så tänker jag att jag ställer en betydligt mer långsiktig och kanske mer öppen fråga. När det kommer till att ta in nya läkemedelskandidater, hur ser ni på det?
De står på labbbordet och väntar på mig, på oss faktiskt. Men problemet är när du har 3 personer i en Nasdaq-registrerat bolag inom läkemedelsindustrin med kliniska studier, det är väldigt svårt att hitta det. Så snart vi har budgeten och resurser till det, så det är bara literally bara att trycka på en knapp. Det är nummer 1, nummer 2 är som gör det lite ännu bättre. Vi har gjort massa upptäckter och fel med GT002 och vi kommer att göra det, har gjort det fel en gång. Jag kommer inte att göra det en gång till. Så de nya kandidater, de kommer att vara betydligt snabbare, för jag vet vad jag ska göra eller vad ska jag inte göra. Och det kommer att också betydligt billigare, för de resurserna kommer att användas mycket mer effektivt. Så patenterna är ju det. Det är inte bara inom GT002-gruppen, det finns GT004, 5, 6, men också finns en helt annan kemisk grupp som vi inte har tittat på ordentligt egentligen på grund av vi har inte resurser till det. En annan kommer kanske bara föra till det till exempel. Det finns en helt gigantiskt stor område som vi inte ens har undersökt. Och det är hela området med smärta. Och GABA-receptorer är involverade i smärtkonduktion. Vi har aldrig tittat om det. Men det hoppas vi kan göra nästa år. Det är med på roadmappen för det. Roadmappen ska också vara realistisk. Eller ska jag sätta så många grejer på roadmappen som jag kan tänka mig. Men det är det.
Michael Robin Witt, VD på Gabather. Tusen tack för att du var här, presenterade och svarade på våra frågor.
Jag tackar.